Hi everybody, very welcome to Mentor and yet another video podcast. As always, I hope you're doing absolutely fantastic. Today on the video, guys, is the airline industry heading towards a complete collapse? We're seeing airlines all over the world and especially in Europe grounding their entire or part of their fleet. We're seeing countries on lockdown. What is about to happen? Stay tuned.
31016, 31 right, put on right. Third one in, 31 right. Delta 260.
All right, my friends, I am making this video in a large extent to reassure you guys and to motivate you guys. But make no mistake, this crisis that we are just now seeing is the most serious crisis that I have seen during my 20 years in the professional airline business. And it is probably the crisis of our lifetime. So there's no way to emphasize the impact that this will have on our lives for the coming year or so. The human impact is very hard to measure at the moment, but this video is not going to be about the human part of this. I'm going to focus on the airline industry and what is happening right now in order for you to get a little bit of a better sense of it and put it into perspective. So what we're seeing right now is a fairly strong response from governments all over the world, where borders are being closed, where airspaces are being closed down, and where there is a real fear in all of the population about traveling, about being out in groups, about getting this contagion and passing it on to the weaker groups, to our elderlies, to our sick people. And that is completely understandable. Now, the effect that this is having is that the airlines will have to go into a type of hibernation mode. The only thing that they can do is to try to minimize the damage as much as possible. This means that some of the airlines will be continuing to fly to a small extent, whatever they can, where they can do rescue flights, for example, to repatriate people from other countries back to their home countries. But to a large extent, there is no market there anymore. There's no one paying to fly, which means that the airlines is going to have to hunker down. They sit down and they try to minimize their costs. And what you have to understand is that an airline has an enormous amount of running costs, okay? Anytime an aircraft is sitting on the ground, not producing money, it is costing money. Either via huge, financial bank loans, or just in, keeping up personnel, keeping maintenance, keeping spare parts. Everything keeps costing money, even as the airline industry shuts down. So that's what we're seeing at the moment. This is why they're talking about airlines potentially going bankrupt, even if they're not flying. So the weakest members of the airline industry is facing some real potentially hard time, and we are likely going to see more bankruptcies in the industry, right? That's what I wanted to start with saying. And I know you're thinking he's not motivating us much right now, but let's just stick with me, okay? So another thing that we have to remember is that human nature and the way that we human think about things is that we have a tendency to see the kind of environment we're in and project the future based on that. So a good example of that is, for example, the housing bubble that we experienced here in Spain back between 2002 and 2008. When I came here looking for houses back in 2005, together with my wife, we were looking at potentially buying a summer house. And I looked at the house prices and I looked at the medium income in Spain and I said, this does not make sense. How come that the houses are so expensive when the medium income is so low? And the simple answer to that was that people have seen the house prices increase, right? They have projected that into the future, think that it's going to continue to increase, which means that they have borrowed more money in order to buy a more expensive house, and that has been fueling the bubble, okay? So that continued up until there was something that stopped it. But people thought that the house price increase was going to continue forever, because when something is going well, it will continue to go well. Subsequently, when something starts to go bad, crises typically happen very, very rapidly. There's something that triggers it, and then the response to it is really rapid. And when that happens, we tend to see it as, a continuing drop through the floor, down into the basement, through the basement floor, into the ground, just continuing down and down and down forever. That's because that's how our brain interprets things. But if we would apply a little bit more logic to it, we will be able to put the current situation into a larger context and see what has been going on before, and then kind of use that in order to create a more likely trajectory. So in the terms of the airline industry, if we go back to the last 50 years, there has been a tremendous growth in the airline industry. Now this graph will show you that. And as you can see, the increase in paid passenger kilometers have just continued. Before the year 2000, there were several crises that impacted on the airline industry. But as you can see from the graph, they hardly made a dent on the overall increase in, flown passenger kilometers. After 2000, we can see the first dent in this curve, and that was the horrific terrorist attacks of 9/11. And after that, you can see that there is a slight decrease. So that means that there's less people flying. It means that most likely airlines have gone bankrupt and pilots have been fired. But very short after that, within a year or so, the increase comes back again, and it's quicker, and it goes back onto the same curve as it was on before. So it's basically just a dent in an ongoing positive curve. Now, I was doing my own training back in 2001, right? I watched live as one of the aircraft flew into those towers, and I remember sitting there in the middle of my ATPL theory thinking, the world is now going to change. The world that we're in yesterday is going to look different from the world tomorrow. And we're in the same situation now, guys. The airline world and the world we live in is not going to be the same. It's going to look differently. But that doesn't mean that it's all doom and gloom. All right? The fact that it will look different, the fact that we will have other players in the airline business, does not mean that it is over. All right? Because if you see that curve continue, you see that then we went through the SARS epidemic that had a huge influence on the Asian part of the airline business. But it made hardly a dent in the overall curve. Then we come to 2008. And in 2008, I remember myself sitting there seeing how the financial markets were collapsing, seeing how the banks were struggling. And I remember reading the same kind of black, really, really bad headlines that we're reading right now, saying that it is likely that the banks are going to collapse. It is likely that the financial systems is going to stop working from the way that we are used to seeing them. And we might go back to trading chickens with each other in order to survive. Those were actual headlines that we were seeing, okay? But that didn't happen. There was a temporary drop in the curve, and then we jumped back onto the overall trajectory again. Now we're in that situation again now. We are facing a threat that should not be underestimated, and it will have an impact on you, on me, on everyone who's involved in any kind of industry around the world. But is it going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back? No, I don't think so anyway. And it's going to have to take a lot to convince me that that is the case. What will happen is that us, human race, will come together, we will help each other out, we will take and do whatever is necessary in order to get back to what we see as our world, what we want to do. And we want to travel, we want to meet new people, we want to interact with each other. Everything shows that that is what the human race wants to do. I live in Spain. I have my Swedish part of the family up in northern Sweden. I will continue to travel to see them. I want to go and learn about new things, about new cultures, new languages. I want to meet you guys. I want to do meetups with people. And the same goes for the large part of the population. So after an initial downturn, which will come with this, we will see airlines going bankrupt. Like I said, we will see people being afraid and being a little bit timid to move. But eventually it will fade back. The economy is going to start churning again. People will have money. People will want to come back to this. And we will see this going back up. Okay? Now, some figures for you. Stuff that I want you to think about in these dark times. I started up together with Captain Andy O'Shea, the Airline Pilot Club, about a year ago. That's when we started working on what we were just about to launch this month, okay? The reason we started doing that was because we saw that there's going to be a need to find really good quality pilots out in the layers which have not been tapped into yet. Right? People who could not afford to become pilots, but really had all of the qualities and all of the willpower and all of the stamina in order to be great pilots. Now, the reason we were looking at that in the first case was because we were seeing a potential of a pilot shortage coming up. And we didn't base that on just a hunch or a feeling. We based that on figures that we were given by the largest flight schools in the world, by the airlines in the world, by the aircraft manufacturers, and they all said exactly the same thing, which is there are a couple of things happening right now that is going to lead to a lack of pilots unless we do something. Those things, they still exist, all right? It is likely that we are going to push the need forward, maybe a few months, maybe a year, maybe a year and a half, but the need is still there. So what we were looking at is, for example, the baby boomers, the baby booming generation, the people that were born in the 1950s, which was the large, very, very big generation of people. A huge extent of the pilot body were born in the 1950s. This is why you think about pilots as these gray-haired gentlemen flying around. They will go into retirement now, right? They should have gone in years ago, but they changed the retirement age from 60 years to 65 years old in order to kind of postpone this thing happening. Those people are going to have to be replaced by you guys, right? The other thing is that the markets in Asia have been growing rapidly. The figures that we were building our models on was a need between 2017 to 2027 of about 90,000 new pilots in the Asia region, right? In North America, similar numbers, 85,000 new pilots needed in that 10-year period. And that was based largely on people retirement, but also expansion of fleets, more traveling, low-cost carriers popping up, and more international travel. In Europe, it's a little bit slower, but there's still a projected need in those 10 years of 50,000 new pilots. So as you can see, those were the numbers that we were basing our projections on before this current crisis occurred. And it's hundreds of thousands of new pilots needed to be added to the system. Okay. And I said it before, and I'll say it again, these figures have not changed, right? These figures are still there, and they are just going to have to be pushed into the future. So what should you be thinking about all of this then? Well, first of all, like I said in the beginning, there's no denying there's going to be a few rough years ahead, right? There's going to be a combined effect of some of the weaker players in the airline industry definitely going bankrupt. The pilots that were employed by these airlines are going to go out into the market, and they are the ones that are likely going to be the first ones employed when the market starts turning around again. So there's no question about the fact that it's going to be rough, especially if you are just examined new pilot out there, okay? But like I said, if you look at the industry as a whole, and you see that the amount of paid passenger kilometers keeps going up, following the curve that we have been talking about before, well then that means that even if some players goes into bankruptcy, since the market is still there, it just means that the stronger players out there is going to expand more quickly. It's going to take more market share, and they will still need those pilots to fly. So it is likely that a lot of this is going to be absorbed, but it might take a while. Just like it did back in 2001 after 9/11, just like it did after 2008. But it always came back, guys. So while it feels like you are now just dropped into a dark cave, remember that it's not a cave, it's a tunnel. And at the end of that tunnel, there's a light, and you just have to keep walking towards it. So what you need to do right now is you need to go into crisis management mode. Depending on where you are, if you're about to go into training, if you are in training, if you've just left training, or if you have been employed but you're looking at a possible loss of employment. I, for example, myself, am on furlough now. I don't know for how long or if I'm going to get my job back at the end of this. But what we have to do is crisis management. So first thing, concentrate on flying the aircraft. Concentrate on what you have right now. What you have right now is you need to take care of yourself, your family, your grandparents. You need to make sure that you're safe, and to a certain extent that you have a little bit of a financial cushion to keep you going on for the next few months. Right. After that, you need a good decision-making model in order to prioritize what is important and what is not. I did a video on Wednesday about crisis management. I want you to check that out. It has some good information about it that will help you. Okay. But all in all, this means that if you, for example, have just left training, well, then you need to, in some way, retain your knowledge. Keep working on being as attractive as possible when this curve starts shooting up again and it's time for you to go for your first interview. It might mean that you need to keep going back to a simulator. So talk to whoever did hopefully your APS MCC course. Maybe they will have something in store for you. Talk to your ATO, the flight school that you just came out of. Me and my colleagues in the Airline Pilot Club, we're working hard to try to influence ATOs around the world to really help as much as possible. We are giving them tools through the airlinepilotclub.com to give potential courses, virtual classroom. We are enticing anyone who is in a position to help right now, because it's time for us to help each other as much as possible. You might be able to help me. I will certainly do my absolute best to try to help you guys, because I realize that this situation right now is dire for a lot of people. I am in a position to reach a lot of people, to influence a lot of people, and I will do that. Right? This is what I am promising you that I will do, and I know that my colleagues in the Airline Pilot Club are saying exactly the same. You will see videos coming out that are branded through the Airline Pilot Club, and we are doing that. We are giving information, we are interviewing people in decision-making positions in the industry in order to give you as much accurate information as possible, because you will need information in order to get through this. So guys, together we have to focus on beating this thing. Follow your authorities' instruction. Listen to healthcare professionals. Do not look so much at social media, and definitely do not share things that does not come from official sources. So we beat this thing. Then we rebuild the world that we want to live in. And that includes traveling, that includes flying. And after that, we do our damnedest to come out as winners. All right? You with me on that? Good. Keep following the channel. There will be much more content coming out. I am sitting at home in my house now, completely locked down. So I will be doing and using the time that I have now to try to give you as much good material and as helpful material as possible. So subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Right guys, I really hope that you liked that. If you want more content like that, more aviation content, well then check this out. I hope that you have subscribed to the channel and that you've highlighted the little notification bell. See you inside of the Mentour Aviation app, and have an absolutely fantastic day. Bye-bye.